Hi everyone, and welcome to week 3 of Big Ideas, conversations with Stanford's own Nobel Laureates and MacArthur Fellows. I'm Ran Abramitzky, a professor of economics, and my guest today is my great colleague Guido Imbens. Guido is the applied econometrics professor and a professor of economics in both the economics department and the Graduate School of Business. His research focuses on developing methods for drawing causal inferences in observational studies. Guido is a fellow in both the Econometric Society and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Now, Professor Imbens is the co-recipient of the 2021 Nobel Prize in Economics, along with fellow economists David Card and Josh Angrist for their contributions towards methodologies for the analysis of causal relationships. Now, it is difficult to overstate how the methods Guido developed revolutionized the field of economics. Although economists have always been interested in causal relationships, we simply lacked methods to study in a credible way causal questions like what's the effect of X on Y. One way to get a sense of Guido's impact is to look for the term causal inference in the prestigious working paper series of the NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research. And so the term causal inference was rarely mentioned in the 1980s and 1990s, but nowadays over 50% of NBER working papers use this term explicitly. And causal inference has become common in many other fields, like in political science and statistics and so on. And as of this morning, when I looked, Guido's papers have received almost 100,000 citations, which is really mind-boggling. So welcome, Guido. It's really great to have you with us.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for the very kind introduction.
So, you know, we economists are often interested in causal effects. Questions like what are the effects of financial crisis, what are the effects of minimum wage on employment, what are the effects of immigration on wages. But of course the challenge is we often can't run experiments in social sciences in the same way they can run them in clinical trials. So for example, to test the effect of a vaccine, the researcher can randomly give a vaccine to a treatment group and not to a control group and then see the differences in outcomes between the two groups. But of course we can't and definitely wouldn't want to randomly hit some states with a financial crisis just to be able to test its effect. So my first question to you is really how can we answer causal questions in a world we can't run experiments and only have observational data?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an interesting question. Of course, experiments are really incredibly powerful for uncovering the causal effects. And kind of we rely on that so much in parts of our lives. It's kind of hard to keep in mind how important it is, and that there was a time when we weren't doing that. When drug companies would start selling drugs without having properly analyzed what the causal effects are. And so at some point, the Congress actually started mandating that for the Food and Drug Administration to approve new medical treatments, they would have to be vetted through randomized experiments. And that's greatly improved practice there and has avoided the drugs getting sold that don't work very well and that have lots of side effects. But clearly in social science, there's a lot of cases where we can't do that. If we're interested, and there's questions that are of great importance for society, if we're interested in the effect of education on labor market outcomes, say of going to college or not, we can't do a randomized experiment where we randomly assign half the people to go to college and prevent the other half from going to college. It wouldn't really be feasible. It clearly wouldn't be ethical, and there's no way we're going to do those things. So we have to figure out ways of answering those questions kind of slightly more indirectly in ways that are not going to be quite as credible, but hopefully still credible enough, and doing that with data where people have made choices to go to college, and clearly deliberate choices, because they expect that for them the benefit of going to college for whatever things they care about are bigger than the costs associated with that. And so one of the things we do is try find instances where there is at least some randomness in that decision. And so clearly overall people think very hard about whether they should go to college. But you can see some patterns in the data where it's clear that there's some randomness. So one example is when David Carth, together with Josh, one of the people I shared the prize with, when David Carth was looking at the returns to education, he noticed that people living in a town where there is a community college, where there's a college nearby, are more likely to go to college than if people live in a place where there's no higher education, no institution of higher education nearby. And maybe that's still not completely random. Clearly people live in different places for a lot of reasons, and they may be related to whether there's colleges there. But part of that may be random. And so you can use some of that variation to look and get credible estimates of the effect of education. And Josh Angrist was also looking at the returns to education, and he noticed in work together with Alan Kruger that compulsory schooling laws kind of affect people in slightly different ways. Typically, compulsory schooling laws work by setting a date by which you need to start going to school. So if you're born, the law may say that if you turn 5 by September 30th, you need to start going to school the next year. But if you turn 5 on October 1st or later, then you don't need to go to school that year. You can wait another year. And so clearly the kids born on September 30th or October 1st are not really any different in terms of ability or in terms of backgrounds or in any other relevant ways. But the law treats them differently. Now, that may not have made a difference for you guys because you guys are all in college, so you wanted to stay in school longer than you had to. But for some people, it turns out that actually does make a difference. And you see that the people born on September 30th, on average, have slightly more schooling than the people born on October 1st. And now that is kind of random, because it was essentially random when they were born. And so you can compare what happens to these people afterwards for these two groups and attribute that to this slight difference in education levels. And there's another way, very complementary to what David Carth was doing, but another way in which Angrist and Kruger kind of tried to figure out the returns to schooling.
Yep. So let's unbundle this a little bit. So let's start with one natural experiment that you studied that actually involved an actual lottery. Maybe those are easier to understand. So you were interested in understanding what might be the effects of giving people, say, a universal basic income on employment, and so you actually teamed up with the lottery in Massachusetts. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about that study?
Yeah, sure. So this is the very early kind of at the time when I was getting interested in causality and causal inferences. So I was teaching this class with a statistician, Don Rubin, and we're talking about actually one of the things we were talking about was how you would study the effect of child poverty and how whether it was ever credible to just compare kids who grew up in rich families versus kids who grow up in poor families. I think we were kind of talking about what type of experiment would actually would allow you to really study that. And again, it would be very hard to do such an experiment, and it wouldn't be ethical. But what you would ideally like to do is sort of have a bunch of these families and then give some of them money for a long, sort of every year for a long period of time, and see how what would happen to the children. But then we thought about, well, how could you do that without actually running an experiment? And we discussed how you might want to use a lottery, where a lottery essentially does that for you. A number of people buy lottery tickets, and some of them randomly win these large sums of money, and that was actually very convenient from our perspective. You typically don't get a lump sum, but you get a fixed amount every year for a long time. In the case of the lottery we were looking at, you would get, say if you won $500,000, you would get $25,000 a year for 20 years. And so that actually kind of mimics what a universal basic income would look like. Not quite, and getting it from the lottery may not be quite the same as getting it from the government, but at least it gives you some idea what would actually happen to families in a way that you no longer have to worry about the families getting the money being very different, being fundamentally different, being systematically different from the families who don't win the lottery. And so then it turns out it's not quite as easy. One thing is that the lottery doesn't actually randomize over families, it randomizes over lottery tickets. And some people buy more lottery tickets than others, and that's related to all sorts of things. But basically there's some randomization going on that really helps us address the complications that the people with lots of money may be very different for lots of reasons from people with very little money.
And what did you find, by the way?
And so we found that people end up, so one of the big concerns with universal basic income is that it may disincentivize people from actually working if they get the guaranteed income. And it turns out there's a little bit of that, but actually very little, that most of the people, and especially on the lower part of the income distribution, because we had information on what their regular income was, didn't change how much they were working very much. There were some people who retired a little earlier, but in general, most people kept their labor supply, kept their hours they worked at pretty much the same level as before. I think to put a number on that, kind of per dollar they would get every year from the lottery, they would end up earning about 8 cents less. So 8%, there was an 8% reduction in earnings from working per dollar that they would get from the lottery. So not a particularly large effect there.
Yeah. So when the researcher has data on actual lotteries, I guess it is simple to at least conceptually understand how you might answer a causal question. The lottery creates the randomness required to mimic an actual experiment. But natural experiments don't always involve an actual lottery, like some of the examples that you gave earlier. And they often use like policy changes or random cutoffs. So could you walk us through, like one example of how the researcher can still tell cause and effect from a natural experiment like the ones that do not involve the lottery?
Yeah, so one kind of very generic example that you see happen a lot is that administrators kind of have rules assigning people to different treatments. For example, it's clear that it would be unethical and difficult to run an experiment to look at what is the effect of holding kids back in school. If they don't do very well, sometimes children have to repeat a particular grade. And we might be interested in whether that actually helps, whether that helps these kids in the long run, what that does for their subsequent school career. But how does that get determined? Often there's the students take exams, and then if they score below some threshold, they may be required to repeat the year. And if they score above that threshold, they get treated differently. They're not required to repeat the year. Now that may not completely determine whether people repeat a year, but it may be very highly correlated with that. And so one strategy there is one example of a natural experiment is that you compare these students who score very close to that threshold. And at that point, if you don't think these tests are particularly accurate, they're particularly good at saying, well, these kids absolutely have to repeat a year, and for these kids it doesn't matter. But having and so you think that kids very close to that threshold would actually be very similar in all relevant aspects. And so you can compare these kids who score just above the threshold and don't repeat the year, and kids who score just below the threshold and do repeat the year, and then use that to estimate what the effect is of actually repeating a year. Another kind of example of that is the study from Josh Angus, where he looks at the effect of going to more selective schools in Boston. And this was a particular set of schools that had exams to get in. And so Angus there compares the students who scored just above the threshold for getting into these schools and just below, and then later compares how well they do to see what the effect is of going to these schools, whether people really benefit as much as you might think, given how much effort people put into trying to get into those, in qualifying for those schools. And in that case, actually, he finds that the people who don't get into these more selective schools actually end up doing better later. They're just on the margin getting in may not actually help you very much relative to going to school that may be a better fit. Even if you look at common outcomes, they look at a common state exam, and so they conclude that kind of at least on the margin there, these more selective school may not be the best fit for these students on the margin.
Now, over the last decade or so, I guess now you have been doing some work with tech companies around here. Can you tell us about some of this work and what did you learn from this collaboration?
Yeah, sure. So that's something that really started when I came to Stanford just a little over 10 years ago, and I started organizing some seminars on causal inference and issues related with causality. And it turned out there were actually a lot of people, a lot of researchers at the tech companies that were also very interested in those issues. And so some of them presented at these seminars, a lot of them attended these seminars. And so since then I've been talking a lot with these people, and it turns out there's actually just a lot of statisticians, economists, computer science, this working at these companies. And often the questions they're interested in there are very much causal questions. What if we change these algorithms a little bit? Would that make people happier with the search results we show them? Would it what things should we show them that actually lead to more satisfaction on the part of the people engaging with these platforms? These are always causal questions, not just predictive questions where you want to see how well a particular thing predicts the outcomes. You want to see what the effects are of changing, of improving the platform or the environment there, what the causal effects of those interventions are.
Right. So shifting gears a little bit, I want to ask you a few questions about your own path. What led you to study economics and causal inference in general?
Yeah, so first with economics, I grew up in the Netherlands, and so there the educational system is a little different. And one part where it's different is that you need to choose a major while you're still in high school. So you apply to go to college, but you apply to a particular major. So I was interested at that time in mathematics and sort of related fields. But I didn't think it was good enough in pure math, so I wanted to do something more applied. And my economics teacher gave me a book by Tim Bergen. It was actually one of the first winners of the Nobel Prize in economics. That prize only started later in '69. And so I find it very engaging. Someone was very involved in Dutch policy circles. He was helping advise the government, but he was also doing very technical academic economics, and that combination of doing things that were actually relevant, but also had a lot of math in it, appealed to me. And so I ended up majoring in econometrics. Actually, that was a separate undergraduate major in Holland at that time. And basically I've stayed in that ever since. The field has kind of changed a bit and has actually become much more explicitly focused on causality, even though implicitly it always had that focus, but it's become a little broader in that sense, and the questions have been becoming more and more interesting and arguably much more relevant for a lot of societal questions.
And you told me that at first your work didn't get that much attention, and I wanted to ask you, how did you have the motivation and confidence to continue to work on these methods that at the time didn't seem to be making much impact and were not widely accepted?
Yeah, so at the time that didn't really bother me that much. When I was a assistant professor, I met Josh Angrist, and we started talking a lot about research. We were both living in university housing at that time in Cambridge, and so we were living in housing where we didn't have laundry facilities, so we'd both spend our Saturday mornings in the local laundromat kind of talking about our work and kind of thinking about what was interesting research, and that's kind of where we started collaborating on some of the research. And at that time, I think both of us felt that it was incredibly engaging. We were really excited about that research. And some of our colleagues gave us very positive feedback. The fact that others didn't really bother us. We were just very excited about it, and that was really the main thing for maintaining that interest and maintaining that focus on that work. It was very interesting last week to kind of read about the Nobel Prize in Medicine, where this woman, I forget actually her, Kathleen Carrico, I think, who was at Penn, and so she did the research for which she got the Nobel Prize kind of very early on. But at that time, it was clear also that she was not getting a lot of positive feedback. She didn't get tenure. They essentially fired her. She couldn't get funding for the research. But clearly, she was very motivated. She thought it was incredibly important, and it turned out she was right. And of course, it's easy. These Nobel Prizes come much later, so it's easy to kind of see what's successful afterwards. But you got to stay motivated because you think it's important, you think it's interesting, and you can't let other people decide for you what's important. Because you may also be wrong, but if you're interested in these things, then it's easy to stay motivated, and that's when great things can get done.
Was there a particular moment that when you knew that your ideas were having a big impact?
Yeah, I mean, I remember some of the research where there were clearly very pivotal moments where I thought we really had gotten somewhere, that I felt we had understood some problems that nobody else at that time really understood as well as we did. The impact kind of was a much slower process. Kind of when initially some of our closer colleagues kind of thought this was really interesting, and then slowly I started teaching it to graduate students, to undergraduates, and I started to realize that actually at other places they were teaching it, and so I could see the impact growing. But the surprising part was really that it just kept growing for a long time.
Yeah, and you spoke a lot about the collaboration you've had. You talked about Josh Angrist in the laundry room, and I know that you have worked with him and with David Card, your co-recipients of the Nobel Prize, and with many students, and with graduate students and undergrads. So could you say a word about how important has teamwork been in your career?
Yeah, I mean, research nowadays is not really something you can do on your own. I mean, there's sort of parts where you sit in your office by yourself and you try to think hard. But a huge amount of it, and that was always so in some of the hard sciences, but it's also true now in a lot of the social sciences, that you have bigger teams where people work together. And that is often one of the things that's the most fun about the work. It's kind of learning these things together, figuring things out together, seeing the students grow and learn to become researchers, and then surpassing you and doing great things. And so the social aspect kind of working together with these people and trying to figure out what things to work on, and getting people interested in these topics and inspiring them, that's a huge part of the satisfaction many of us get out of doing this work.
Right. And finally, before I open the floor to questions from all of you, what would you recommend to young students who are interested in economics or in causal inference? What suggestions would you give them?
Yeah, so actually I looked at the interview you did with Al Roth the other week, and he was saying, well, all these tech companies now, you have all these people doing mechanism design, kind of helping these companies do interesting things. It sort of reminded me of years ago when Hal Varian, who's the chief economist at Google, kind of was going around and saying, I have one word for the undergraduate: statistics. And that statistics was going to be the skill that was going to be incredibly important. And from that perspective, I sort of feel that this combination of economics and statistics and computer science is just very powerful. One of the things that's been really interesting working with these tech companies is that they often, more so than the universities, have these interdisciplinary teams where when I'm there, I'm always working kind of with computer scientists and statisticians, and all these different disciplines bring new perspectives to these problems, and it's really the combination of these different disciplines that leads to great progress, and the teamwork there at these companies is even easier to set up and to maintain than it often is at the universities. So I think at the moment there's just all these opportunities for doing research or applying these methods in lots of different places in the tech companies, because also in the universities where now these methods are used very widely in all of the social sciences, and so it reminds me actually of something Brad Efron, kind of in the statistics department here, has stressed many times, that sort of as a statistician, the nice thing is you get to play in everybody else's backyard. You get to work on all these different problems, and I've sort of worked on medical applications. I've worked on economic applications, and I've worked on lots of different areas. And it's just always exciting to see these new problems and see how some of these same methodologies can help shed light on the problems there.
Guido, thank you very much. So my bright students, Tamri and Jenna, will walk with the microphone. So if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand.
Thank you, Dr. Imbens and Dr. Abramitzky, for the very insightful discussions. So my question is just more general in nature. What are some open problems in econometrics that you wish more people were working on / paying attention to?
Well, so at a very high level, I think climate change is something where it would be incredibly good to have more economists involved in trying to kind of figure out what we can do to mitigate the risks, to deal with some of the changes, and kind of to make that more specific, to and tie it to kind of some of the methods I've been involved in. There's a series of articles in the Guardian newspaper earlier this year, where they were looking at these carbon offsets, which have become very popular as ways of dealing with climate change. And they argued that in a lot of cases, this is essentially a scam, where these carbon offsets pay for particular areas not to be clear-cut if there's forests there. But the question is really a causal one there, but if you pay for that, does that actually mean that an area that otherwise would have been cut is now cut? And that's actually very hard to establish. And kind of using state-of-the-art methodologies, they found that actually it didn't look like there was much of an effect of these carbon offsets, and a lot of the money was wasted. And so I think there's kind of a lot of it's sort of clearly very important questions there, and we need to figure out better ways of making sure that we deal with the climate change. And so I think that's true not just for economists, that's true for all the sciences and for lots of academic disciplines. And we're going to need a lot of sophisticated data science to help with that. And this is something where all different disciplines need to come together to help deal with these problems.
Thank you for the very insightful conversation. And my question was, if you could please go more in depth into what do you think, when are you supposed to really, I guess, disregard the people who don't pay attention to your research and beyond research, and when are you supposed to actually maybe realize that you're hitting a brick wall? So in short, I was wondering if you could please go more in depth into when to not give up versus when to maybe see in another direction.
Yeah, so I mean that's a very tricky, it's a very interesting question. It's a very tricky thing. So I feel nowadays, I feel early on that was something that was very challenging for me to kind of see what was actually a good problem and where it was worth spending a lot of time trying to make progress versus when to give up and decide that actually there was not going to be any useful insight coming out of that. And so I feel over the years I've gained more intuition for that. But when I was working on the problems early on with Angrist, exposed some of that work now looks to me very straightforward and intuitive, but it took us a huge amount of time because we kept going in the wrong direction a lot of the time. But at some level, we were very, and maybe foolishly so, we were very confident that there was something there was something to learn. But it took us a huge amount of time and going in lots of directions that were not working before we hit on the right way of framing the problem in a way that a very clear solution emerged. And that's kind of a very tricky thing, and I don't quite know how to teach that very well, other than kind of saying, yes, here I just feel that there is something there. I feel that there's some way that we're not looking at the problem from the right way, and we need to find another way of looking at this problem that's going to help us get to the solution. And at some level, the insight in what we did before was reformulating the problem in a way that allowed us to then, in a very simple way, derive the insights we obtained. But that's kind of a hard thing in general, and you see that a lot. So one of the great privileges sort of that comes with the prize, you get to interact with a lot of other people who've done really interesting research, and sort of I've often talked to them about sort of what at these different stages when you're frustrated about not making progress, and how do you decide when there's something that's actually working. And one of the things that was very interesting last year, the physics prize was for these people who did these experiments about particles interacting at a distance. And at the time they were doing that research, there were a lot of people saying that was just not worth doing, that was not interesting, that was never going to work. And these people deep down felt that there was something there, and that they would be able to make some progress. And they did, and they came up with very interesting results. But it's very hard to see that. And the same kind of with the medicine prize this year. Kind of these people felt that there's something really useful about the mRNA stuff, but other people didn't see that, and they had a hard time getting funding and getting promotions. But so that's a very difficult thing.
All right, thanks for the talk. My question is, how is artificial intelligence changing the way we think about causal inference, and where do you think we're going with this?
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. So there's a lot of people thinking about it and trying to figure out how that's going to help. And in fact, they've done some experiments where they asked them various causal questions, and if you're not careful with the way you do the prompts, ChatGPT does very poorly. If you're very careful with the prompts, then it does better, but it's still not doing quite as well, because at some level it's a prediction-based approach, and that may not always work very well. But of course, they've made so much progress with these large language models in the last couple of years. It seems very hard to bet against them making a lot of progress in this area as well. So I'll be very curious to see how that goes. But at the moment, that's one of the places where it's still clearly not there yet.
Thank you, Doctor, for having us today. My question is, how do you think like the current political scenario and the perspectives for the next 2 years will affect the future of economics in America and worldwide?
That's a very difficult question, because the events from the last week are very tragic. What's been happening with the attack on Israel has been very tragic. And within America, within the United States, the political situation is also gotten much more complicated in the last 10 years or so. And partly what concerns me is that you see I grew up in the Netherlands, and there you similarly see that populism has gained a lot of grounds, and you see kind of in a lot of the other countries in Europe that the political situation has become much more polarized, and it's been much harder to get a consensus for what seem very sensible policies. So I don't really know whether that's that's going, but it's certainly a big concern.
Thank you, Dr. Imbens, for the talk. My question has to do with how do you know to what extent in these natural experiments that don't have like quite random mapping to like what the true like idealized version of the experiment would be, like to what extent can you draw conclusions compared to like what the idealized version? So to give an example, you mentioned that like you for the universal income one, you base off of lottery tickets and not people, but it also is limited by only people that would enter the lottery in the first place, or you don't have truly like everyone getting universal basic income. You only have some people are receiving it, the lottery winners themselves. So how do you decide to what extent like this mapping is like good enough to count as like pseudo-random?
Yeah, but so there's that's a very interesting question. So there's a couple of parts of that. One is about the internal validity. Even for this particular population, do we really get the right results? Because there could be other things going on. In the end, we did a survey to get get information from these people, and the survey response was only about 50%. So it could well be that the people who didn't respond are very different from the people who responded, despite the fact that the lottery itself is random. And so there we kind of did a whole bunch of statistical tests that are really very focused on trying to see if that creates problems. So one important way is sort of saying, well, if we apply the same analysis, but we look at the outcome that we know where winning the lottery has no effect, namely your earnings the year before you won the lottery. Well, at that point, it couldn't have been affected by something that happens in the future. So we know that effect is zero there. And these methods work well there, and they actually deliver the zero there. Then the other part is about external validity. Clearly, we are not really interested in people who played the lottery. We were interested in what the effect of a universal basic income would be for the whole US population. So we did a lot of analysis comparing the people in the lottery in our survey to general surveys of the US population to see how different they are. Were they much older? Were they much richer? Were they more highly or more educated? And so we could kind of see how different these people are, and then look at ways of reweighting the lottery sample to make them look more like the US population, and seeing how sensitive the results are to that. So there we just did a whole bunch of additional analysis to investigate those questions, which are clearly very important for interpreting what we were getting out of those analyses.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. I'm curious about the ethics behind some of these tests. Like if you talk about, say, the threshold test at these schools, you say in the end sometimes these students will do better at schools that are maybe not considered as prestigious, but what are the ethics of being involved in a test where it determines if a student does go to a school or doesn't go to a school?
Well, so in that case, these schools were doing these tests already. They were deciding on whom to admit to the school. There's a long tradition of this particular set of schools. These are referred to as exam schools, where to get admitted, you need to pass a particular exam. So what the researchers did was not change how the students were treated, either by the schools or in any other way. All they did was analyze these data, essentially comparing outcomes, comparing how students did later on statewide exams, and look at the correlations between that and how well they did on that particular schools of exams. So I'm not quite sure what you see there as the ethical concern. The researchers were not directly doing anything intervening in the mechanism. We're just passively recording the data in a way that allows you to learn then about the efficacy of the whole process and learn about what things that would be very informative for the students in actually making their decisions whether to do these exams and where to go.
We'll have time for one more question.
So you want to follow up?
Just quickly, so just not specifically for the school test, but just it seems as a whole that there are many tests that can be done in the world that may not be considered ethical. How do you consider the ethics of just tests as a whole?
Yeah, so that is a much bigger question. Kind of, in many cases, clearly these tests are not optimal. These tests are very noisy ways of measuring how suitable students are for admission to educational institutions or other things. But of course, it's very hard to develop more holistic admission schemes without them being prohibitively expensive in terms of the time costs in doing so. So that there's going to be a trade-off there, and I'm not exactly sure how to balance those things. There was a question there.
First, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. And my question was, is there a topic that you're particularly interested in or that you really want to spend time researching now?
Yes, I'm at a general level, I'm very interested at the moment in trying to find ways of combining kind of both experimentation and using observational data. I think that there's a lot of ways in which experiments are really very powerful for giving us answers, but only to very narrow questions. And kind of at the same time, we have all this observational data, but it has lots of problems with it, and finding ways of integrating that in a way that can help policymakers make better decisions is something that I find very interesting at the moment.
Any other question that we missed? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.